Remember when Netflix first began putting out original content? Shows like House of Cards, Narcos, and Orange is the New Black played a huge role in Netflix's rise to success, but I'd argue that what played an even bigger role was the distribution of these shows. If, like me, you were brought up in the era of terrestrial television where you had to wait a week between episodes, and if you didn't record it, you simply missed it, the idea of being able to watch an entire season right from the get-go just seemed like we'd moved into this whole new era of entertainment. And for those first few years, particularly when I was a student, I loved the fact that you could just binge an entire season pretty much over the space of a weekend. But now that the novelty has worn off, I'd argue that Netflix really has to go back to traditional scheduling. There are two main reasons why Netflix should replicate the model being used by its competitors, and before I get into what those are, I just want to say, as always, thanks for swinging by my channel. If you haven't hit that subscribe button already, please do so now, and if you're feeling extra generous, why not hit that like button as well? You will have my eternal gratitude in return. So when I say competitors in relation to Netflix, I'm talking specifically about Disney+. Now, don't get me wrong, Prime Video has some fantastic shows, but it hasn't quite captured the zeitgeist in the same way that Disney's streaming service has, so I'm going to be focusing on Disney Plus for this first point. If you have a Disney Plus subscription, then you'll already know that the service releases episodes for its main shows on a weekly basis. Just like the TV networks of old, it's standard stuff, but what is extraordinary about it is the press coverage that happens for these shows, and also the interaction and conversation about them that's happening online. Take The Mandalorian, for instance. Once word got out that there was a Baby Yoda in the show, people just couldn't get enough of it, and that weekly format just helped to keep the conversation going even further. WandaVision recently benefited from the same format, as the show's mystery kept people talking week on week over what was going to happen next. Even though it might have been happening digitally, it was the same premise as that typical water cooler conversation that helped to make Lost and Twin Peaks so popular back in the day. Now, let's take a look at what happened with Netflix over the same period. And to be fair, Netflix has had an extraordinary year. I mean, in 2020, it saw some of its highest numbers yet with a captive audience and a huge thirst for content. Shows like Tiger King kept growing through word of mouth, but Netflix's main original shows like The Crown, Bridgerton, and The Queen's Gambit all suffered from the same problem, in that once the initial hype died down, so did the conversation around them. And I feel that the effort that went into these shows is lost when people are trying to get through them as quickly as possible, particularly just to be part of the discourse and avoid having anything spoiled for them online. One such example can be found in the middle of The Crown Season 4, as the show takes a break from its royal antics to tell the real-life story of Michael Fagan, someone who was completely dissatisfied with the policies of Margaret Thatcher, and so he broke into Buckingham Palace to plead with the Queen about the state of the country. The episode does a fantastic job of showcasing Britain's social climate in the early 1980s, and the episode's one-off performance from Tom Brooke is fascinating to watch. But the episode was overshadowed by the main overarching narrative, which, for anyone who blitzed through the series as quickly as possible, is going to be the thing that they remember the most. If Netflix really wants people to remember its shows and celebrate the craftsmanship that goes into them, then the service just has to move over to a weekly release schedule. Netflix already does this for outside shows that it has the international distribution rights to, such as The Good Place and Jane the Virgin, the former of which really benefited from having that extra amount of time so that word of mouth could spread. All of this should be reason enough for Netflix to change its ways, but I did say that there were two parts to my rationale, and the second part lies in the business practices that Netflix now employs in deciding which shows to renew. Because Netflix drops all episodes of a new season at the same time, that means that the opening week is a huge metric in deciding whether or not to fund a new season, which just opens up a huge mess for the viewers. There's so much content out there to watch these days that you really have to be picky in deciding what you're going to latch onto next, and certainly the last thing anyone wants is to jump on board a new show and have it cancelled shortly thereafter. Problem is, that's exactly what's happening. Take Jupiter's Legacy, for instance, Netflix's adaptation of the comic book of the same name. It released in early May to a decent amount of fanfare, but clearly not enough fanfare because not even a month after the show's release, it had already been cancelled. These practices make popularity from word of mouth completely impossible. I mean, take Breaking Bad, for instance. That was a show that only grew as time went on. But could you imagine what might have happened had that been a Netflix original? It also prevents any cult shows from gaining traction. Shows like Community and Supernatural, which never had huge viewership numbers during their time on air, still managed to amass some of the biggest TV fandoms ever created. It's gotten to the point that whatever Netflix stands to gain from its current release strategy, it simply doesn't outweigh what it's losing in return. So I really hope Netflix takes a leaf out of the Disney Plus playbook and moves over to weekly programming. But let me know what you think. Do you agree that Netflix's current strategy just isn't working anymore? Or do you believe that there's a reason why Netflix shouldn't change face? However you feel, please let me know in the comments below.